It began with 5 words. "I need a job, please." David Langford looked up from his monitor, blinking slowly, as if those words had somehow short-circuited the carefully programmed flow of his morning. His espresso sat untouched. His tie was crisp, his schedule airtight, his world fully under control, until a 6-year-old girl in a red sweater stepped into his glass-walled office and set everything off balance. The silence after she spoke was electric. His assistant, Olivia, stood frozen in the doorway, pale and unsure whether to laugh, apologize, or call security. David cleared his throat. "A child?" he asked flatly, more to himself than anyone else. Before Olivia could respond, the little girl walked in. She wore a worn denim skirt, mismatched socks, and scuffed sneakers. A backpack hung from her shoulders, the straps fraying at the edges. Her light brown hair was slightly tangled, her big eyes calm and unblinking. She walked right up to his enormous desk, stood on her tiptoes, and placed a folded piece of paper in front of him. Then, looking up with steady conviction, she repeated, "I need a job. David Langford, CEO of Langford Capital and self-made. Titan of finance, had survived boardroom betrayals, federal audits, and economic downturns without flinching. But in that moment, he genuinely didn't know what to say. He picked up the paper. It was a child's version of a résumé, written in large, uneven letters with a dull pencil and covered in crayon stars. It read, "I can clean. I'm quiet. I don't cry in front of people. I can help. I can learn. Please." A shaky heart was drawn in the corner. David looked at the girl again, and something in her stillness, in the way she stood perfectly still with her fists clenched at her sides, unsettled him. He pushed his chair back and knelt beside her. "What's your name?" he asked, softening his voice. "Lily," she replied without hesitation. "Lily Carter." "And why are you here, Lily? You're a little girl, you don't need a job." Her eyes didn't waver. "My mom is sick," she said. No tears, no dramatics, just truth. Something shifted in the air. David felt it in his chest. A tight, unfamiliar squeeze. She said it like she'd said it before, like she had accepted it, but would not surrender to it. "I have to help her," Lily added. "We don't have money. If I work, maybe she can." "Stay alive." David sat back on his heels. This wasn't a publicity stunt. This wasn't a joke. This was a 6-year-old who had marched into the tallest building on the block with nothing but a backpack and a handwritten plea. He stood up slowly, holding her paper in his hand like it might shatter. "Where is your mom now?" he asked. "She's at Mercy Clinic," Lily said. "Room 12. She sleeps a lot now." He looked at Olivia, who still stood in the doorway, wide-eyed. He gave her a small nod, and she stepped out, closing the door quietly behind her. "Does she know you're here?" he asked. Lily shook her head. "She would have said no, but I saw your name in a newspaper. I remembered the building because it's really shiny, and my mom said people with money can help when no one else does." David turned and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window behind his desk. The city stretched far beneath him, glittering and unaware. He had spent decades rising above that city. Above the noise, above the needs of people he didn't know. Power, efficiency, control. That was his formula. But today, a little girl had walked straight into his fortress with none of those things, and somehow she had his full attention. He turned back. "You're very brave, Lily," she shrugged. "It's not brave. It's just what you do when you love someone." That hit him harder than he expected. He didn't flinch when stocks crashed. He didn't shake when competitors sued. But that sentence, the way she said it, so matter-of-fact, with her tiny fingers curled around the strap of her backpack, that nearly brought him to his knees. He walked back to her, lowered himself again to her level, and said gently, "Okay, let's go see your mom." Lily blinked. Really? David nodded. I'm not promising anything, but I want to meet her, and I want to help. She smiled, small but steady, and adjusted her backpack. She's really tired, she said, like she was warning him. Sometimes, she doesn't wake up when I talk to her. David reached for his coat, picked up her paper, and held the office door open. Let's go, Lily. As they stepped into the elevator, David caught a glimpse of himself in the reflective wall, tailored suit, pristine posture, next to a child in beat-up shoes, holding a dream written in crayon. And for the first time in as long as he could remember, he wasn't heading to a boardroom or a power lunch. He was following a little girl who had reminded him, without even knowing it, what it meant to feel. As the elevator descended, he looked down at the piece of paper in his hand once more. Crayon, stars, pencil words, a heart that trembled. It was the most important résumé he'd ever read. Great, here is. The car ride to Mercy Clinic was quiet. David sat in the back seat beside Lily, the résumé still folded in his hand. As the city, blurred by outside, he watched her out of the corner of his eye. She didn't fidget. She didn't ask questions. She simply stared out the window, her small frame very still, as if conserving energy for something bigger. He had ridden in this car 1,000 times, headed to meetings, mergers, fundraisers, but never to a place like this. Never for something that didn't involve charts or contracts. Lily broke the silence only once. She used to sing to me at night, she said softly, still looking out the window. Now, she just sleeps. David didn't respond. There was nothing to say yet. He was a man who operated in precision, not emotion. But Lily, she was operating on something entirely different, something unmeasurable. When they pulled up outside, the clinic, it was like stepping into another world. Mercy Clinic was a small, faded building tucked between a pawn shop and an old church. The paint was peeling, and the front sign flickered weakly, a far cry from the sleek towers David was used to. But Lily moved with purpose, guiding him straight through the lobby like she'd done it 100 times. The nurse at the front desk looked up as they approached. Her eyes widened when she saw David, still dressed in his tailored coat and expensive shoes. Room 12, Lily said confidently. She's my mom. The nurse hesitated, then nodded and pointed down the hall. They walked. David took in the details. Cracked linoleum floors, faint smell of antiseptic. The kind of silence that didn't feel peaceful. It felt like waiting. At room 12, Lily paused with her hand on the door. She's really tired, she repeated. Don't be scared if she doesn't talk. I talk for both of us now. David nodded, his throat dry. The room was dim. A monitor beeped steadily beside the bed. IV lines trailed from pale arms. And in the center of it all was a woman who looked impossibly fragile. Her face hollow, skin too pale, hair limp and clinging to her forehead. But there was peace in her stillness. Not giving up. Just pausing. Lily walked in first. She placed her backpack on the chair and reached for her mother's hand with a tenderness that nearly broke David's composure. Mom, she whispered. I brought someone. He's the man I told you about. David stepped inside slowly, unsure where to stand. He approached the bed and placed Lily's résumé gently on the bedside table. I don't know if you can hear me, he said softly, but I met your daughter today, and I don't think I'll ever be the same again. Lily sat down beside her mother and looked up at him. She was a nurse, she said. She helped people, but when she got sick, nobody helped her. David felt something twist inside. He had grown up with little, but not like this. Not cereal for dinner, not silence instead of lullabies. Why didn't anyone help? He asked quietly. They said it cost too much, Lily replied. We had to leave our apartment. Now we rent one room. I sleep on a couch. Mom sleeps most of the time. David took a slow breath. He wasn't just looking at a sick woman or a determined child. He was staring at the fine print of every report
he'd ever signed without reading too closely. Every foundation donation, every tax write-off labeled charity. He looked at Lily. "Did you really walk here alone?"
he asked. She nodded. "I looked up the building myself. My mom always says you fix things fast, so I thought maybe you could fix this." He couldn't respond. His entire career had been built on fixing broken systems, salvaging failing deals, restructuring companies. But nothing had prepared him for this. A girl too young to know how much she was asking, and yet wise enough to do it anyway. "You're very brave," he said again. She looked at him, serious. "It's not brave. It's just what you do when you love someone." David turned to the nurse who had just entered to check the monitor. "What's her name?" he asked. "Anna Carter," the nurse replied, surprised. "She was admitted 2 weeks ago. The clinic's doing what it can, but she needs more. We've been trying to reach some assistance programs, but it's slow, and we're losing time." David didn't blink. "I need her full records," he said. "Today. I'll send someone over to start the transfer, private care, whatever it takes." The nurse hesitated. "Sir, I don't know if we can—" "You can," he said. "I'll make sure of it." Lily looked up from her seat. "Really?" she asked. David crouched down beside her again. "I'm not making promises I can't keep," he said. "But I can promise this. I'm going to try. And we're not leaving her here." The nurse slipped out quickly, already pulling out her phone. David glanced at the chair beside the bed and gestured to it. "You want to sit?" he asked. Lily climbed up slowly, her backpack clutched to her chest. She looked small in the chair, but not scared. Just tired. David sat beside the bed and folded his hands in his lap. There were no charts in front of him. No bottom lines, no analysts, just a mother barely holding on and a daughter who refused to let go. "You came to my office," he said, "looking for a job." Lily nodded. "I think what you really did," he said slowly, "was give me one." She tilted her head. "And what job is that?" she asked. David looked at Anna, then at the girl who had walked into his world like a storm in soft shoes. "To fix what needs fixing," he said, "and to show up, even when nobody else does." Lily didn't reply. She just leaned her head against the side of the bed, her tiny fingers wrapped around her mother's wrist. David sat with them as the beeping machines kept time, and somewhere deep in his chest, something long dormant began to shift. Not in strategy, not in logic, but in something older, something that sounded like, "Stay." Later that afternoon, David stood just outside room 12 as Lily packed her backpack. The nurse had confirmed arrangements were underway. A private ambulance was en route. Anna Carter would be transferred to Langford Medical Center, a facility David personally funded but had never visited until now. Inside the room, Anna remained still, her breathing faint but steady. Machines tracked every beat, every breath, each sound a reminder that time was not on their side. Lily sat beside the bed, softly humming under her breath. She wasn't crying. She wasn't afraid. She was simply there, holding her mother's hand as if it were the most natural thing in the world. David watched her from the doorway. It wasn't pity that rooted him in place. It was something else, something quieter and heavier. Responsibility. Not the kind listed in corporate bylaws, a human kind, the kind that makes you want to show up before anyone asks, the kind that doesn't have a KPI. When the ambulance arrived, David rode with them. The EMTs recognized him immediately but said nothing. Lily sat beside her mother, never letting go of her hand. He made 2 phone calls during the ride, one to his personal physician to oversee Anna's intake, the other to his legal advisor to authorize full financial coverage, quietly, without press, without limits. The ride was short, but it felt long. The weight of the day settled over him like an invisible coat. Lily remained silent the whole time. Only, when they pulled up in front of the hospital, did she speak? She's going to be okay, right? David didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked at her, really looked. And then, gently, she has a better chance now than she did yesterday. That's something. Lily nodded and stepped out of the ambulance, waiting for him before walking. Through the automatic doors, Langford Medical Center looked nothing like Mercy Clinic. White marble floors, soothing lights, soft music humming through the air, everything designed to suggest peace, progress, hope. The nurses were already waiting with a gurney and a medical team. David personally followed them through the halls, ignoring the glances and whispers. He wasn't a guest here today. He wasn't a name on a plaque. He was something else entirely. Lily walked right beside the gurney, her hand still wrapped around her mother's. When they arrived at the new room, Lily stepped in first and looked around. It was larger, brighter. Sunlight spilled in through big windows. There were fresh linens, a reclining chair, and, on the nightstand, a small vase of daisies. One of the nurses, having seen Lily's résumé, had thought it might help. David stood at the foot of the bed as Anna was gently transferred machines. Reconnected, notes whispered between doctors. Once they cleared the room, Lily climbed into the chair beside the bed and reached into her backpack. She pulled out a folded drawing and placed it carefully on the table. 3 stick figures, a woman with long hair, a girl with a red sweater, and a tall man in a suit with square shoulders. Above them, a bright yellow sun, and below, written in crooked letters, "Us." David blinked hard and turned away for a moment, pretending to study the hallway through the glass. Lily approached and tugged gently at his coat. "Is it okay if I stay with her tonight?" He looked down. "Of course. I've arranged for a little room next door for you to rest in, too. But you can stay as long as you want." "Okay," she said, then paused. "Can I draw in there?" He smiled softly. "We'll get you markers, all the colors." Later that evening, after Anna had been checked again and stabilized, David sat in the family lounge, watching Lily color quietly. She had changed into a clean sweater, her hair freshly brushed. The weight on her shoulders hadn't lifted, but it had loosened, just enough. She looked up from her page. "Do you think she'll smile again?" David took a moment before answering. "I do," he said. "And when she does, it'll be because of you." Lily didn't respond with words. She just leaned into his side, resting her head gently against his arm. David stayed still. No part of this felt strange anymore. He didn't question why he was here. He didn't rationalize it as a gesture or an obligation. Somewhere between that office and this room, he had stopped seeing this as a detour. This was the road now, and he was walking it with them. That night, after Lily fell asleep curled in the chair beside her mother, David sat outside in the hallway, hands folded, eyes on the monitor inside. He didn't check his phone. He didn't open his laptop. He just sat there, watching the slow, deliberate rise and fall of Anna Carter's chest, and without anyone hearing, he whispered, "We're not done. We're just getting started." David arrived at the hospital just after sunrise the next morning, a paper bag in one hand and 2 cups of cocoa in the other. He had stopped at a corner bakery on the way in, a place he'd passed for years without a second glance. This morning, he knew the woman behind the counter by name. He knew which pastry Lily had pointed at the day before. He even remembered how she liked her cocoa, with extra marshmallows if possible. When he stepped into the pediatric lounge, Lily was already awake, curled up on the couch, legs tucked beneath her. She looked up and smiled. Tired, but real. "I brought breakfast," he said, handing her the bag and warm drink. "Thanks," she whispered, taking it like it was something precious. They sat in silence for a while. The Hospital was quieter in the early hours, as if even the machines hadn't fully woken yet. David didn't feel the usual pull of his calendar. No meetings, no buzzing calls. His attention stayed entirely in this moment. "I talked to the doctors this morning," he said gently. "Your mom's numbers are holding steady. That's a good sign." Lily nodded. "Do they think she'll wake up?" "They think she could," he said. "Soon." She stared at the cup in her hands. "I miss her voice." David didn't respond right away. He had sat across from board members who shouted and billionaires who whispered threats behind polite smiles. But that quiet ache in Lily's voice, that was what stuck. Later that morning, he joined the medical team for a briefing. He listened closely, asked the right questions. A neurologist reviewed Anna's brain activity. Slow, but promising. Her vitals were stable, and she was responding to treatment. The next 48 hours would be critical. David authorized additional specialists. A nutritionist was brought in. Daily reports were scheduled. Every decision, big or small, flowed through him now. Not because he needed control, but because he refused to let anyone else drop the thread. This wasn't a business transaction. It was someone's mother, someone's whole world, and that changed everything. That afternoon, he took Lily to the hospital garden. A nurse had found her a small jacket, and she skipped a few steps ahead of him, pausing to inspect each flower. Bed as if every petal might offer some kind of answer. They reached a bench by a small fountain, and she climbed up beside him. Without saying anything, she pulled a folded drawing from her backpack and handed it to him. It was a new picture. 3 figures stood together, a woman with long hair, a small girl with a bright red sweater, and a tall man in a blue suit with large hands. She had drawn a little heart over all 3 of them. "Is that me?" he asked softly. Lily nodded. "You're part of us now," she said, "even if you don't have to be." David looked at the drawing for a long time. Then carefully he folded it and slipped it into the inner pocket of his coat. "I want to be," he said. "Not just today, always." She didn't say anything, but her hand slipped into his. It stayed there the entire walk back. That evening, David sat by Anna's side while Lily napped nearby. He watched the monitors, counted the quiet, steady beeps, and then he began to speak, not loudly, just softly, as if telling stories to someone who might be able to hear him through the fog. He talked about his childhood, about growing up in a tiny apartment with his mother working 2 jobs, about falling asleep on the floor of her office sometimes, about how he used to believe that money would fix everything. He talked about the day Lily walked into his office with a paper in her hand and a hope too big to carry alone. "You saved her," he whispered, glancing at the sleeping girl. "But I think she saved me first." A few minutes later, a nurse stepped in and checked the monitors. Everything stable. No sudden changes. But something was different. Anna's hand moved. Not much, but enough to make David sit up straighter. Then her eyelids fluttered, slow, uncertain, like someone emerging from deep water. David turned quickly to Lily, who was still asleep on the small sofa, her arms wrapped around a pillow. He walked to her and gently touched her shoulder. "Lily," he said quietly. "Sweetheart, I think your mom's waking up." She blinked, groggily, then shot up. Within seconds, she was by her mother's side. "Mom," she whispered. "It's me. I'm here." Anna's eyes, still hazy, moved toward the voice. "Lily?" She rasped, barely audible but enough to fill the room like sunlight. Lily burst into tears for the first time. David stood at the foot of the bed, unmoving, breath caught. The nurse entered quickly, followed by a doctor. The room filled with movement, murmured updates, instruments being adjusted, but David barely noticed. Anna was awake, and she had said her daughter's name. When things calmed again, Anna looked at David for the first time. Her gaze was weak but steady. She didn't speak, but her eyes said enough. She knew. She knew someone had stayed. That evening, after things had settled and Anna had fallen back asleep, Lily and David sat once more in the courtyard. The sun had just slipped behind the skyline, casting a warm purple across the sky. "She said my name," Lily whispered, head resting against his arm. "She never forgot it," David said. "She was just finding her way back." Lily was quiet for a moment. Then, "You helped her?" she said. David looked out at the garden. "No," he said finally. "You did. I just followed where you led." Lily didn't reply, but her fingers tightened slightly around his. That night, before he left, she walked him to the hospital entrance. "You'll come back tomorrow, right?" she asked. He knelt beside her. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. "You're not alone anymore." As the automatic doors slid open behind him and the night air brushed against his face, David Langford realized something that startled him. For the first time in years, he felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The fifth day began, with a sense of quiet anticipation, like the space between lightning and thunder. David arrived before dawn. The hospital wing was still dim, its usual rhythm not yet in motion. Nurses moved softly between rooms. Machines hummed at low volume. He passed them with a quiet nod, carrying a paper bag filled with Lily's favorite pastries and 2 cups of cocoa, one with extra marshmallows, just how she liked it. When he stepped into room 212, Lily was already awake. She sat curled beside her mother's bed, knees tucked to her chest, humming a lullaby under her breath. Anna lay still but peaceful. Her color was better, her breathing stronger. "She didn't wake up again yet," Lily said without turning, "but I think she will." She squeezed my hand while I was talking to her. David set the bag down on the side table. "She's fighting," he said. "She's hearing you." "I believe that." They shared breakfast in quiet, the occasional beep of machines filling the silence like punctuation. Lily ate slowly, but her appetite had returned. She even laughed once, just a soft breath of it, when he made a joke about the cocoa being stronger than his morning espresso, a small victory. Later that morning, David joined the medical staff for another update. Anna's progress, though slow, was steady. Her blood pressure had normalized. Her oxygen levels had stabilized. Her brain scans showed consistent signs of engagement. There was still risk, still fragility, but there was also hope, real hope. He listened closely, asked thoughtful questions, took notes. He'd hired specialists from 3 different hospitals, each with their own theories. Nutrition plans were being adjusted. Physical therapy was penciled in to begin next week. David Langford, the man who had once managed empires, was now managing one life. And for the first time, it didn't feel like work. It felt like purpose. That afternoon, he took Lily outside for some air. The hospital garden had become their small ritual, a space where they could pretend, even briefly, that things were normal. She skipped a few steps ahead of him, as always, pausing to crouch by a flower bed. She used to love gardens, Lily said suddenly. She'd take me to the park on her days off and name every flower like they were people. David smiled. Sounds like she's the kind of person who finds beauty in small things. She is, Lily said, then added, she's also the kind of person who gives away her coat if someone else is cold, even if she's freezing. They reached the bench, and Lily sat beside him, swinging her legs. She pulled another drawing from her backpack and handed it to him. This one was different. 3 figures again, but now standing in front of a small house with flowers around it. The same tall man in the suit, the same woman with long hair, the same red sweater girl with a wide smile. Above them, in colored block letters, it read, "Our home." when we're all together." David swallowed hard. "Is this a place you've seen?" he asked. She shook her head. "It's one I want to see." He folded the paper carefully and slid it into his coat, right next to the first. "I think we can make that real," he said quietly. When they returned to the room, something had changed. Anna was stirring. Her fingers moved slightly against the blanket. Her head tilted, her lips parted as if trying to speak. "Mom?" Lily said. Instantly at her side, Anna's eyelids fluttered open. It took a few moments, slow and uncertain. But then her gaze settled, focused, and locked on the girl leaning over her. "Lily," she rasped, her voice a thread of breath. "Lily," gasped. "You remember me? You remember?" Anna's lips moved again, barely forming the words. "Of course, baby." Tears spilled down Lily's cheeks. David stood at the doorway, unmoving. His chest tightened. He watched as the girl leaned in, burying her face into her mother's shoulder. He watched as Anna, weak but steady, lifted her hand to rest it against Lily's hair. The nurse entered quickly, followed by 2 doctors. There was a flurry of medical assessments, murmured updates, adjustments to machines. David stepped aside but stayed close. Anna Carter had returned. Not fully. Not yet. But enough. After the room calmed, Anna's eyes shifted toward him. Her voice was too faint to speak again, but her expression softened. Recognition. Not because she remembered his name or face, but because she could feel what he'd done. Later that evening, with Anna asleep once more, Lily and David sat in the hallway. "She said my name again," Lily whispered, almost afraid to say it out loud. "That means she's still mine." David looked at her. "She never stopped being yours," he said. "She was just making her way back to you." Lily leaned into his arm, quiet. "She told me once that I was the bravest person she knew," Lily said. "But I don't feel brave." David placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to feel brave to be brave," he said. "You just have to show up." She didn't reply. But she didn't move away either. That night, as Lily settled into her temporary bed next to her mother's, David remained seated by the window. He had no desire to leave. He didn't need a meeting, room, or a conference call. He had everything he needed right here, a child who had refused to give up, and a woman who was slowly, painfully, coming back from the edge. And for the first time in his life, David Langford, the man who fixed everything, for everyone else, wasn't trying to solve a problem. He was just there. And that, somehow, was more powerful than any fix he'd ever made. The 6th day began not with movement, but with presence. There were no medical alarms, no urgent knocks, just the rhythmic beep of the monitor and the sound of shallow breathing. Still, something had shifted. David arrived earlier than usual. He greeted the front desk nurses by name now. They no longer gave him strange looks when he came in with cocoa and pastries. He wasn't a donor today. He was someone's person. He entered room 212. He found Lily sitting beside the bed, her arms wrapped around her knees, softly humming again. She turned when he entered and offered a smile that was almost playful. "She squeezed my hand twice this morning," Lily said. David set down the cocoa, pulling a chair closer to the bed. "Then she's getting stronger." "She said my name. Again when she woke up," Lily added. "And she asked if you were the man in the suit." David raised an eyebrow. "And what did you tell her?" I said, "Yeah, that's David. He helped us." She didn't seem surprised. "No," Lily said, thoughtful. It was like she already knew. David leaned back slightly in his chair, looking at Anna. Her face was still pale and her body clearly exhausted, but her eyes opened now and again, clear, lucid, tracking the room and her daughter's every move. Later that morning, a doctor updated them on her condition. Steady improvement, no signs of regression. Early indicators suggested Anna might begin light physical therapy by the end of the week. Nutrition levels were rising. Her body was responding. It wasn't a miracle. It was a slow crawl back to life, and David was determined to make sure it continued. He stayed involved, sat through rounds, read reports, took late-night calls from physicians who were now more comfortable updating him than the hospital director. But he never let that distract from Lily. She came first. By noon, he had arranged for a pediatric counselor to meet with her, to help her process everything. He brought in books, coloring supplies, and new markers. That afternoon, Lily sat on the floor of the recovery room, coloring with intense focus while Anna dozed. When she finished, she handed David the drawing. It showed 3 people again, like all the others. But this time, something was different. The stick figure version of Anna wore a flower crown. Her cheeks were pink. The sun was brighter than ever. Underneath, written in block letters, "Getting better." David stared at it for a long time. "She looks happy," he said quietly. "She is," Lily said. "She's not alone anymore." That evening, the hospital garden was full of the soft rustle of leaves and fading light. David sat with Lily on their usual bench. The fountain behind them bubbled gently. "Do you think we'll go home soon?" Lily asked. David considered how to answer. "We're taking it one day at a time," he said carefully. "But yes, I think soon your mom will be strong enough to start thinking about next steps." She tilted her head. "Do we have a home?" David looked at her. "Where are you staying now?" "With a friend of my mom's. 1 room. I sleep on the couch." He nodded slowly. "I've been thinking about that," he said. "I have an apartment available. It's not far from here, near the botanical gardens. It's quiet, safe, big, enough for both of you." She blinked. "Really?" "It's ready whenever you are, just until your mom decides what comes next." Lily didn't answer right away, but her hand slipped into his again. That night, as he prepared to leave, a social worker named Mara arrived. She had been following the case from the moment Anna was transferred, and she asked to speak with David privately. They sat in the family consultation room while Lily remained with her mother. Mara reviewed the files and recent notes from David's legal team. "You've gone above and beyond," she said, flipping through the paperwork. "Most people in your position offer a donation, maybe a letter. You've stayed." David sat forward slightly. "It's not charity," he said. "It's family, even if it doesn't look the way people expect it to." Mara watched him for a beat. "Have you thought about what happens next, long term, especially if Anna's recovery takes time?" David nodded. "If that day comes, if anything happens, I'd want to be there for Lily." "You're saying you'd consider guardianship?" He paused, not because he didn't mean it, but because this wasn't how he made decisions. Not with heart, not without plans. But this had never been about plans. "Yes," he said finally. "If it ever comes to that. I'd want her to have someone who stays." Mara made a note. "That means a lot. It matters." When David returned to the room, Lily was sitting in the chair beside her mom, telling her a story in a whisper. Anna's hand moved gently over her daughter's hair. David stood at the door and watched for a moment before stepping closer. Anna turned her head slightly toward him. Her voice was weak but steady. "I know I didn't ask for help," she said. He knelt beside the bed. "You didn't have to," he replied. "Lily walked into my life and reminded me what I'd forgotten." Anna smiled faintly. "She does that," she whispered. "Just shows up and changes everything." That night, the lights dimmed slowly in the recovery wing. Nurses moved quietly. Outside, the wind rustled through trees. Inside room 212, David sat by the window. Lily curled up asleep nearby, Anna breathing softly in the hospital bed. And in that quiet, he realized something. He hadn't just shown up for them. They had shown up for him too. The seventh morning brought light through the hospital windows with a warmth that hadn't been there before. Anna Carter was sitting up in bed. Her posture was shaky, her movements slow, but her cheeks had a trace of color and her voice had begun to hold its shape again. She could hold a conversation now. Short, soft exchanges that left Lily glowing with joy. She asked for oatmeal this morning, Lily whispered to David as he entered, holding up an empty tray with pride. She ate it. David smiled and walked over to the bedside. "Good morning, Anna." She looked up at him, her voice still hoarse but clear. "Morning, David." Her eyes carried weight, so much more than her words. Gratitude, stillness, strength. A quiet recognition of the man who had stayed. Lily bounced gently on the side of the bed, careful not to disturb the tubes or wires. "I told her everything," she said, "about the cocoa, the drawings, even how you helped me pick new markers." Anna turned her gaze to David again. "You really stayed through all that?" David nodded. "Every day." She smiled. "Then thank you for everything I missed." Later that morning, the doctors held another meeting. David attended with the same calm intensity he once reserved for mergers. The team confirmed what Lily already believed in her bones. Anna's recovery, though slow, was real. Within days, she'd move to a recovery suite. Physical therapy would follow. She might even begin walking again with assistance. The danger of not waking up had passed. They were now planning for what came after, and David, he was already a step ahead. That afternoon, while Lily napped in the family lounge, David met once more with Mara, the social worker. She sat with a tablet in her lap, reviewing legal notes. "I've read the reports from the hospital staff," she said. "Everyone here sees you as part of the family. I've spoken with your legal team. You're making arrangements for Anna and Lily to move?" "Yes," David said. "There's a unit in one of my buildings, top floor, quiet. It's fully furnished, safe, and it's temporary. It's theirs as long as they need it." Mara leaned forward slightly. "And you?" David hesitated. "I don't know what I expected when Lily walked into my office. I didn't plan for any of this, but I'm not leaving. If they'll let me, I'll stay involved. Not just as support, but as someone they can count on. You understand how unusual this is, right?" "I do," he said. "But I also know how rare it is to be needed like this, and to want to stay." Mara smiled. "Well, that's the most honest answer I've heard in months." Later that day, David returned to the room with a small suitcase and 2 sets of clothes. The nurses helped Anna sit upright and stretch. Lily changed into a new sweater, soft blue this time, and brushed her hair. They were beginning to look like a family again. That evening, the 3 of them ate dinner together. It wasn't fancy. Microwaved meals from the lounge, apples from the snack cart, and paper cups of water. But Lily grinned the entire time. "You eat funny," she told David as he tried balancing his tray on his knee. "Funny how?" "Like someone who's never had to hold his food and talk at the same time." Anna laughed softly, the sound faint but filled with life. After dinner, Lily pulled out another drawing. She handed it to her mother first. In it, a house with a garden, a red sweater girl, a woman in a yellow dress, and a tall figure in a suit holding both of their hands. She'd written in the corner, "When we're all together, it feels like home." Anna looked at the picture for a long time, her eyes brimming. Then she turned to David. "She didn't just bring me back," she said. "She brought you to us." David knelt beside the bed. "She walked into my life and rewrote everything I thought I knew," he said. "I thought I was here to help her, but she's the one who gave me something I didn't even know I needed." Reached out slowly and took his hand. "You've given her something I was afraid I couldn't anymore. A future that isn't just about surviving." "She deserves it," David said. "You both do." That night, as Lily lay in her fold-out bed next to her mother, David tucked her in gently. She looked up at him with sleepy eyes. "Do you think everything will stay like this?" she asked. He didn't offer false certainty. "It won't always. Be easy," he said. "But I'll be here. We'll get through it. Together." She reached for his hand. "I'm glad I came to your office," she whispered. David held her hand and smiled. "So am I," he said. "You changed everything." Outside, the window, the city lights sparkled like distant stars. The skyline had never looked softer or closer. And as David sat back in his chair, watching the two people who now anchored his world, he realized he hadn't stepped in to rescue them. He had stepped in to belong. The 8th day felt different. Not because the struggle had ended, but because a new beginning had quietly taken root. David arrived at the hospital carrying a bouquet of daisies, Lily's favorite according to Anna, and 3 paper bags from the bakery, now a morning ritual. He had learned that the woman behind the counter had 2 sons, that Lily liked strawberry jam, and that warm cocoa tasted better in the quiet of early morning. He knew these things now. They mattered. When he entered room 212, Anna was sitting upright, her posture stronger. Her hair had been brushed, and someone had placed the drawing with the garden and the little house on the windowsill. Lily ran to him. She walked to the bathroom today, holding the nurse's hand. David beamed. "That's amazing." Anna smiled softly. "You should have seen Lily's face. You'd think I climbed a mountain." "You did," Lily said proudly, climbing onto the bed beside her mother. "And you didn't fall." The room filled with laughter, light, imperfect, real. Later that morning, David met once more with the lead physician and Mara. The update was clear. Anna was approved to move into a recovery suite the following day. Rehab would begin immediately. The progress was cautious but promising. "She has a long road ahead," the doctor said, "but she's walking it now." David thanked them and stepped into the hallway, standing for a moment in front of a painting he hadn't noticed before. A watercolor of a tree, roots tangled and uneven, some cracked around stone, others wrapping around deep fractures in the earth. Still, it stood tall. He understood now. Things didn't have to grow perfectly to be alive. They just needed space, and light, and time. When he returned to the room, Lily was drawing again. This time, it wasn't just a house. It was their apartment, the one David had prepared. A window with a sun, books on a shelf, 3 stick figures sitting on a couch. Above them, in crayon. Home. "Where's this?" David asked. Lily looked up. "Our place, when we move." He smiled. "You ready for that?" She nodded. "Are you?" He met her eyes. "More than I ever thought I could be." That afternoon, David escorted them both, Anna in a wheelchair, Lily skipping ahead, to the car waiting outside. No press, no photographers, just a quiet move toward something new. The apartment was warm and filled with light. The building's concierge greeted them by name. There were clean linens, stocked cabinets, and a desk already set up for Lily's coloring supplies. Anna turned in the doorway, eyes glassy. "You didn't have to do all this." David looked around, then back at her. "I didn't do it out of obligation. I did it because it was right, and because I want to be here." Later that evening, after Lily had unpacked her markers and drawn a new picture of the 3 of them watching TV, the 3 sat together on the couch, the city glowing outside the window. "Tell me something honest," Anna said. "Always," David replied. "Do you think this is going to last?" David leaned forward, hands clasped. "I know things won't always be perfect. There'll be hard days. But I'm not leaving. Not now. Not ever." Anna's eyes shimmered. "Thank you for seeing us. Not just helping, but seeing." David swallowed, emotion pressing into his chest. "You saved me too," he said. "Both of you." That night, as Lily prepared for bed, she tugged on David's sleeve. "You'll come back tomorrow, right?" He knelt to meet her eyes. "I'm not going anywhere." She threw her arms around him, hugging him tightly. "I think we're a team now," she whispered. He smiled into her hair. "Yeah, we are." After she was tucked in, David stood in the doorway of her room, watching her breathe evenly, peacefully. Then, he walked to the balcony, the city stretching far beneath him, no longer something he watched from above, but something he was a part of. The man who had once measured his worth in numbers and acquisitions now measured his days in smiles, small victories, and bedtime hugs. He had built towers of glass. But this was the first real home he'd ever known. And as the night deepened and the lights of the city flickered like stars, David Langford whispered the truth that had rewritten the story of his life. "I stayed